Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So apologies as I am very tired as I make this video. I'm operating on maybe like 2 hours sleep or something like that. So if I forget anything or this isn't the most detailed post-fight review, forgive me, but it is what it is. So Canelo Alvarez defeats and knocks out Caleb Plant in the 11th round to become the new undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. Now this fight was relatively interesting all of the way through. A much more interesting fight than I previously imagined. Quite frankly, going into this fight I wasn't really excited, mainly because I've never really rated Caleb Plant all that highly. But credit to him, he did a bit better than I expected, and he started out this fight boxing in a manner in which I was asking for. Going into this fight, I felt Caleb's only chance was to stick and move and spend as little time on the ropes or flat-footed as possible, and for the first few rounds, he was trying to do that. He was still, at times, sitting on the ropes and standing straight on with Canelo flat-footed, but for the most part, Caleb Plant was flicking a quick and consistent jab. It wasn't powerful, but it was a nuisance for Canelo in the first few rounds. And Plant was trying to mix it up now and again with 1-2s, 1-2-3s. He would actually try to lead with the uppercut on occasion, which I felt was quite risky, but in the first four rounds, I would say, I felt Caleb Plant was boxing a fight which was giving Canelo problems. Canelo was trying to close the distance and walk down Caleb Plant, but he really wasn't doing it with much of a jab. He was basically just marching forwards with a high guard, and he was waiting for Caleb Plant to back himself up into the ropes or into the corner, and when Plant did that, that's when Canelo would let go of his power shots. I think Canelo definitely needed much more of a jab in the first 4 rounds. But nevertheless, the first 4 rounds were quite interesting. I wasn't scoring this fight, quite frankly, but the first 4 were very competitive. A lot of people had it 2 rounds apiece, 3 rounds to 1 to Caleb Plant. First 4 were very competitive, but despite Caleb Plant doing relatively well, watching this fight live, I felt it was a case where Caleb Plant was winning some of the battles, but Canelo Alvarez was winning the war. His shots were a lot harder, a lot more powerful, and every time Canelo did get close and landed a big power shot, whether it be a hook to the head, hook to the body, or overhand right, Caleb Plant would look to hold. And that's another thing in this fight which made me realise eventually Plant's going to break down. Canelo Alvarez, even in the first 4 rounds, was so much stronger than Caleb Plant. A lot of the time Caleb Plant would try to hold and clinch, but Canelo Alvarez actually did a really good job in this fight of getting mainly his right hand, getting his right hand free, and he was actually landing some good hard right hands in the clinch, and I've not really seen that from Canelo from memory, so that was a good adjustment to the clinching of Caleb Plant. Round 5, I felt the fight started to turn, to be honest. Canelo had a really good round. He quickened up his feet, closed the distance quicker. There were times in this fight, and I've never seen this, where Canelo would actually try to jog, like do a little brief jog to try and close the distance. I've never seen that from Canelo. Usually he'll just maraud forwards with slow feet, and somehow he'll get there and get to his opponent. But in this fight, he actually had to quicken up his feet to close the distance, and he was doing that in round 5. And in round 5, Canelo was strafing Caleb Plant with body shots. He was doubling up on the hook, left hook to the head and body combination. He was landing some good chopping overhand rights, and round 5 Caleb Plant was outgunned. But to Plant's credit though, after a bad round 5, he actually got back to his boxing, and once again he was just being a nuisance to Canelo Alvarez. Plant wasn't landing hurtful shots, but he was just shoe shining, stepping back, trying to keep Canelo turning, and when he did that, he was definitely frustrating Canelo. But after the 5th round, Caleb Plant was spending a lot more time on the ropes, in the corner, or basically in the pocket with Canelo Alvarez, and as that was happening, Plant was actually landing some nice little nifty counters on the inside. So, for example, the uppercut from the shoulder roll stance, he was landing some nice snappy uppercuts and some nice short right hands in the pocket. But Canelo's shots were just so much harder, so much more effective, and you could see that the hourglass of Caleb Plant was starting to drain, I guess you would say. So yeah, Caleb Plant was being a nuisance all of the way through this fight, and eventually it got to the 11th round. And at this point, and again, I wasn't scoring this fight, but at this point I felt this fight was relatively competitive. I felt that potentially it could be relatively close. Now, gun to my head, I would say Canelo was winning. You know, he was landing the more effective shots, no doubt about it, but Plant was definitely having his moments in there. So at this point in time, I felt, damn, this potentially could be a close fight if we go to the decision. But in round 11, Canelo Alvarez pulled it out of the bag and got the stoppage. Once again, Caleb Plant was kind of hanging around on the ropes, and that was his undoing in this fight. He got caught with a good left hook by Canelo Alvarez, and Plant tried to block it with his right hand in that shoulder roll stance. And that's one thing Plant was doing quite well earlier in the fight. Maybe in the first four rounds or so, Plant was doing quite a good job of catching Canelo's left hook with his right hand. You know, when you put your right hand to your chin in the shoulder roll, he was actually doing quite a good job of blocking that left hook. But in round 11, his hand didn't get there quick enough. Canelo's left hook landed. It hurt Caleb Plant. And then Canelo followed up with a left uppercut, right uppercut combination, which dropped Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant beat the count, but you could see he was relatively hurt. Canelo Alvarez basically went right back at him, landed a series of shots. I think he landed a short right hand, which made Caleb Plant do the stanky leg. At this point, Caleb Plant completely lost his boxing shape and his boxing stance. He kind of fell back into the ropes, and Canelo Alvarez landed a series of short, hard right hands to the side of the head, which dropped Caleb Plant, and that was it. That was all she wrote. Canelo Alvarez wins the fight by 11th round TKO, and he is the new undisputed super middleweight champion. Now, when it comes to 168, this was probably my favourite Canelo Alvarez fight, because Plant, in my opinion, didn't come to lay down. He tried his best, and like I predicted, it wasn't good enough, but I will say Caleb Plant did a bit better than I expected. A lot of people are going over the top by saying Caleb Plant is the second best guy at 168. I wouldn't go that far. I still think Benavidez would beat the brakes off Caleb Plant. But nevertheless, Caleb Plant's a bit better than I expected. As for Canelo Alvarez, I've got to say, I felt in this fight he looked extremely beatable. He disappointed me, in fact. I was expecting much more from Canelo Alvarez in this fight. I was expecting a much more emphatic performance from Canelo. Now, the finish was emphatic, but if you look at the performance as a whole, I don't think it was all that impressive, quite frankly. And bear in mind, Caleb Plant was like a 10-1 underdog going into this fight. And yeah, against that sort of opponents, I just expected a bit more from Canelo Alvarez. Nevertheless, he got the job done, and the finish, like I said, was emphatic. But yeah, interesting fight, no doubt about it. I quite enjoyed it. I wasn't looking forward to this fight at all. Usually when there's a big fight, a big Vegas fight, like before the first bell goes, I'll get like I'll get butterflies because I'm so excited. But this one, man, I just never had that sort of feeling going into it. But Caleb Plant did make it interesting, and I felt the fight was relatively enjoyable. So yeah, credit to both guys for putting on a show. What next for Canelo Alvarez? I mean, me personally, I would love to see a David Benavidez fight. I think that fight stylistically will be extremely fun. Benavidez brings something different to the table in comparison to Canelo Alvarez's last few opponents at 168. The last few guys Canelo's fought have been quite passive, in particular the last two, Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. They are back foot boxers, guys like to keep range and stay out of harm's way. Whereas David Benavidez, he goes in there to ruffle feathers, throws a lot of punches, he's big, he's quick, hits relatively hard. So I think Benavidez right now at 168 is the most interesting fight for Canelo Alvarez. That's the fight I want to see the most. And that's really the only fight I want to see at 168 from Canelo Alvarez. To me, Benavidez is the only interesting guy left for Canelo in that weight class. But nevertheless, what did you guys think about this fight? How did you score it at the time of the stoppage? Were you impressed with either guy? Share your thoughts below. Peace.